In the heart of Atlanta, where the air hummed with a quiet southern elegance, stood the Eastbrook Women's Medical Center. It was a monument of glass and polished stone, the kind of place that exuded a sterile silence money could buy. Inside, the air conditioning whispered over leather chairs, and floral arrangements looked too perfect to be real. Danielle Carter arrived for her 10:30 a.m. appointment, alone, 6 months pregnant. She was a study in grace, her soft blue maternity dress hugging her form just right. Her skin, a deep, warm brown, glowed in the morning light, but it also drew quick, dismissive glances from passing couples. As she approached the reception desk, a young, blonde receptionist glanced up, then quickly looked back down, feigning a sudden interest in her computer screen. Danielle took a slow, deep breath, a quiet gesture to calm the anxiety that always seemed to bubble up in places like this. "All right, baby," she murmured, a gentle whisper to the life growing inside her. "Let's get this checkup done. Daddy will be here soon." Her husband, Ethan, a man of quiet power and formidable presence, was caught in an urgent matter at the U.S. District Office, but he had promised he would rush over. Ethan always kept his word. Still, a nagging feeling settled in her gut. This was their first 4D scan, a milestone, and she was walking into this polished, impersonal place by herself. When Danielle finally gave her name, the receptionist's friendly demeanor vanished. Her smile faltered, her eyes narrowed with a quiet judgment. "You're here for Dr. Halbert?" she asked, as if the name itself had been uttered incorrectly. "Yes," Danielle replied, a hint of steel entering her voice. "Confirmed it last night." The receptionist gave her a clipboard with a practiced indifference, a subtle act of condescension that made Danielle's hand tremble as she sat down. Other women in the waiting room, their designer handbags clutched a little tighter, shifted uncomfortably away. Danielle tried to remind herself to ignore it, to focus on the small, perfect life inside her. But with every passing second, Ethan wasn't there. The more exposed she felt. Her name was called. The nurse didn't smile, she simply gestured down the hallway. Danielle followed, the soft background music doing little to soothe her nerves. Images of smiling white mothers with their babies lined the walls, and for a fleeting moment, Danielle wondered if a woman like her had ever been featured in this clinic's glossy pamphlets. She was shown into room 3B, a sterile space that smelled of antiseptic and lavender. The door closed with a quiet click, leaving her alone once more. A knot tightened in her stomach. Ethan was running late. Then, the door opened, and Dr. Lindsay Halbert entered. The doctor was a vision in a starched white coat, her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun, her eyes a glacial blue. She offered no greeting, no handshake, no smile. Her gaze swept over Danielle's body with a cold, appraising stare that was anything but medical. "So, you've come alone," the doctor stated. Her voice dipped in condescension. Danielle hesitated. "My husband had a work emergency. He's on his way." A faint smirk ghosted across the doctor's lips. "Of course," she murmured, her words a sharp and cruel blade. "Let me guess. You don't know who the father is. Or maybe he just had enough for the day." Typical. Danielle's breath caught in her throat. She stood up, fists clenched at her sides. "Excuse me, doctor." Halbert moved closer, her voice a low hiss. "Don't you understand what kind of clinic this is? This isn't some public health office. This is a high-end facility for women who care about their health, not women who show up unaccompanied, looking like they just rolled off the bus." "I have every right to be here," Danielle said, her voice shaking but full of a growing dignity. "I am leaving." "Oh, you're not going anywhere just yet, doctor," Halbert sneered, turning away. "Because I think I'm missing something." She touched her wrist. "My watch. A Cartier. I put it on this counter this morning, and now it's gone." She turned back, her eyes locking on Danielle's. "Isn't that an old trick? To walk in and walk out with more than you came with, Dr." Halbert's words hit with the force of a physical blow. Before Danielle could even begin to defend herself, the doctor snapped, "Security will be here in a moment. Don't make this any harder than it has to be." Danielle reached for her phone, but it was too late. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. Two security officers, both large men, entered the room, their expressions as cold and institutional as the facility itself. Danielle Carter, the older one, began. His voice clipped. "We've had a report of a missing item, Doctor. Halbert has identified you as a person of interest. You'll need to come with us." "I didn't take anything," Danielle said, her voice trembling. "This is a mistake. I'm pregnant. I don't feel safe going anywhere with you." "You can explain yourself in the security office," the younger one interrupted, stepping forward. Danielle's heart hammered against her ribs. She was being held like a common criminal. They marched her down a back corridor, past locked doors and through the underbelly of the clinic. The air grew thick with a sense of dread and bureaucracy. They finally led her into a small, windowless room. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead like a swarm of angry wasps. A single metal table stood in the center, and a plastic chair was bolted to the floor. "Sit," the older guard commanded. Danielle sat slowly, her hands resting protectively on her stomach, her fingers trembling. "Please," she said quietly, "I need to call my husband." "The phone," the younger one insisted, reaching for it. "Hand it over." Danielle reluctantly pulled her phone from her purse and placed it on the desk. He snatched it, put it in a drawer, and slammed it shut with a solid thunk. "You can't just take that," she said, her voice rising. "You're not under arrest," the older guard said with a practiced calm. "But you were being detained for questioning. You'll have to cooperate." She tried to fight the rising panic, to hold on to her dignity, but the walls felt like they were closing in. Her body ached, and her stomach tightened. The baby inside her shifted, as if it, too, knew something was terribly wrong. Outside, in the main lobby, Ethan Carter walked through the glass doors. He was a man of quiet power and formidable presence. His tailored charcoal suit and gold lapel pin from the Department of Justice, a stark contrast to the clinic's antiseptic surroundings. His eyes, a calm, steady gaze, were locked straight ahead. He walked with a measured pace, his polished black shoes making no sound on the marble floor. He approached the front desk. The young receptionist looked up, a fake smile on her face, until she met his eyes. That smile vanished instantly. "Good morning," Ethan said, his voice low and calm. "I'm looking for Danielle Carter. She had a 10:30 appointment with Dr. Halbert. I'm her husband." The receptionist's fingers froze over the keyboard. One moment, sir. I'll check." Ethan's eyes never left her. "Please do." She tapped nervously at the keys. "It says she's not in the exam room right now." "Where is she?" The question was quiet, but held an undeniable command. Security was notified about a situation. "I'm not exactly sure what happened." "What situation?" His voice was firm now, his control as sharp as a scalpel. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "I think she's downstairs in the security office." There was an error. "Dr. Halbert, I need to see her now." Ethan leaned forward just slightly, a silent but absolute demand. "Take me there, or tell me who will." She stood up, her face pale. "I'll get a supervisor." "That won't be necessary." Ethan reached into his jacket, pulled out a thin leather wallet, and opened it with practiced precision. Inside was a badge and a credential card bearing the seal of the United States Department of Justice and his full title, Deputy Director, Office of Civil Rights Enforcement. He held the badge in front of her for exactly 3 seconds before putting it away. "Where's the security office?" he asked again. "Down the hall, past the staff elevator, the first door on the left." Without another word, Ethan turned and walked away. His stride was purposeful, a contained tension in his shoulders, making it clear that someone was about to learn they had made a grave mistake. He went down the back corridor and pushed open a nondescript metal door. Inside, Danielle sat in the chair, her face a mixture of fear and indignation. The 2 security guards stood nearby, startled by his sudden appearance. "Can we help you?" the older one asked. "Yes," Ethan said, his voice flat. "You can help me by standing down and explaining in detail why you've unlawfully detained my wife without due cause, without counsel, and without access to her personal property." The guard stiffened. "Ethan," Danielle's head snapped up, a cry of relief escaping her lips. He moved to her side, resting a hand gently on her shoulder. "I'm here. It's over now." He turned back to the guards, his voice suddenly quiet. "I want the name of every individual who ordered this detainment, the report that authorized it, and immediate access to the security footage that led you to my wife." The younger guard took a step back. The older one hesitated. "Look, we're just following protocol. You are not trained in constitutional law." "I am," Ethan interrupted coldly, "and you have violated several federal statutes. Now, show me that footage before I call the Attorney General's office." The room went silent. Danielle closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. The weight of his presence was an anchor in the storm. The older guard, visibly rattled, turned to the wall console and started queuing up the security footage. The screen flickered to life. The hallway feed, the waiting room, and then the angle outside the exam room. The timestamp read 10:41 a.m. Danielle could be seen leaving the room, alone and calm. She touched nothing on her way out. The footage then jumped to 10:52 a.m. when Dr. Halbert emerged, looking at her empty wrist and then at the counter. "There," Ethan said, his voice cold. "Zoom in on the counter." The image sharpened. A shining silver Cartier watch rested beside a tissue box. "She left it behind," Danielle whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Fast forward," Ethan commanded. At 10:54 a.m., a cleaning crew member briefly entered the room. The footage then skipped, a blank screen appearing. The watch was still there. "And then it's gone," the older guard admitted, wiping sweat from his brow. "There's a blind spot in the handoff." "How convenient," Ethan murmured, his voice as sharp as a razor. He walked to the desk, pulled open the drawer, and retrieved Danielle's phone. He handed it to her gently, then addressed the guards again. "Your actions today were a civil rights violation and a criminal offense of false imprisonment. I am filing a formal complaint with the Doge, and a report will be submitted to the Medical Licensing Board before the day is out. I suggest you get your statements in order." He then led Danielle out of the room. She walked taller now, her chin raised, her hands clutching her phone like it was a lifeline. She wanted to see Dr. Halbert again. She wanted to look her in the eye. Back in the main lobby, every eye in the clinic turned to them. Ethan's presence cut through the sterile calm a warning bell. An administrator stepped out of a glass conference room, visibly flustered. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter," he stammered. "Dr. Halbert is inside. We've convened an internal ethics board for an immediate review." "Let's get started," Ethan said. Inside, Dr. Halbert sat at one end of a long glass table, her posture still proud, but with a tension around her eyes that betrayed her confidence. Danielle sat opposite her. Ethan remained standing, his badge visible. "We have reviewed the preliminary footage," the board chairman said. "Mr. Carter, we understand you intend to file a formal action." Ethan placed a stack of typed, signed, and time-stamped papers on the table. "My wife was falsely accused of theft, illegally detained, denied access to communication, and humiliated in a medical facility, all while under your care. We have footage to prove the alleged theft never occurred. We also have audio recordings of the filthy, rashly charged comments made by the attending physician." Dr. Halbert scoffed. "This is absurd. I followed protocol. I had every reason to be suspicious." "You had every reason to assume," Ethan cut in coldly, "based on nothing but her appearance, her skin color, and the fact that she was alone. You saw a problem, not a person." Danielle's voice, though quiet, was filled with a deliberate and powerful clarity. "You looked at me, and you saw something disposable. You didn't see a woman, a wife, a mother. You just saw a stereotype. You humiliated me for walking into a space I had every right to be in." "That's not what happened," Dr. Halbert insisted. "You told me I looked like I came from a bus station. You called me a thief before you ever spoke to me like a human being." A heavy silence fell over the room. The board members exchanged glances. One of them shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Dr. Halbert's actions today are not an isolated incident," Ethan continued. They are indicative of a systemic problem. We are pursuing this through a federal civil rights lawsuit. But more than that, we are demanding a transparent, written public apology, a formal policy reform, mandatory anti-bias training, and her immediate suspension. The board chairman's voice was a little strained as he said, "We will begin those proceedings immediately." As the meeting adjourned, Dr. Halbert stood up quickly, knocking her chair slightly off balance, and stormed out without a word. No one stopped her. A week later, the clinic released a formal statement acknowledging the incident. Dr. Lindsay Halbert was placed on indefinite administrative leave. A full review of the clinic's patient rights policy was initiated. 2 weeks later, Danielle stood at a podium outside the same clinic, flanked by her husband and local civil rights advocates. "This is not just about me," she said calmly, her voice echoing with conviction. "It's about every black woman who walks into a room and is assumed to be less. It's about a system that assumes it can get away with anything. And it's about using our voices to say that we deserve better. We are not silent. We are not afraid. We will not disappear just to make you comfortable." The crowd applauded. Ethan stood beside her, a look of immense pride on his face. As the sun broke through the clouds, Danielle looked down at her stomach, at the life growing inside her, and smiled for the first time in weeks. Not because everything was fixed, but because something had finally begun to change. What do you think is the most important lesson from Danielle's story?